It was a big night last night as we saw Jeff Luhnow on television. First real long form interview that he's done since the cheating scandal broke out. And I think most Astros fans were, I don't know if hoping, expecting him to throw a bunch of other teams under the bus, because that's what Astros fan has done. They've said, well, we did it. What about you? Were you surprised that Jeff Luhnow steered away from bashing other teams for doing similar things?
Well, I think he referenced the Yankees and Red Sox, the scandal with the Apple Watches. He talked about Fitbits, Apple Watches. He said there was somebody, actually a coach, who was doing something with an Apple Watch, and he said he stopped it. I mean, to me, why would he be doing an interview now? I know he wanted to clear his name, or try to, I guess. But I feel like he's doing this also for other reasons. And my guess is he wants to put himself out there as a viable candidate. So he needed to say sorry about certain things, I guess. But it was really more just saying, I didn't do this. And he wants to, I think, open himself up for future employment in Major League Baseball. I think that's what it sounded like. And I think that is what gets to the next point is, I don't think he wants to throw names out there, teams out there, or say, what about that team or what about that team? Because if you want to get employed in Major League Baseball, that's the exact wrong thing to do.
Do you think that this interview helped him out? Do you think this ends up being a net positive for Jeff?
No, I think it maybe opens up discussion for people in Houston to maybe clear his name in some regards with some people in Houston with Astros. People outside of Houston, they actually don't even care. Like, their minds are already made up, and it really doesn't matter what Jeff Luhnow says. They're not going to listen to what he says in an interview. They're going to take it with the biggest grain of salt you've ever seen. And the question is, what does this do for owners? I'm just telling you this. Owners will know he's smart. Owners will know he understands how to build a team. That's going to matter a lot to owners. What an owner is going to have to be okay with is whether or not a fan base and players would be okay with a Jeff Luhnow. And I don't think anything he said on there is going to change anyone's opinion one way or the other. I think he raised some valid points. I don't know about you. I thought he raised some valid points about whether or not he knew as much as people thought. But at the end of the day, he's talented, and talented people get second chances. And I think as long as he didn't strike out on the interview, I just don't think it was the home run that some people were hoping for.
Do you feel like if the ultimate goal is to get him back into baseball or back into another gig, do you think that he's on the way to doing that? Do you think he is going to work in baseball?
Well, I do think that having an interview of any kind where questions are asked and he's given answers is your first step. You at least get some conversation moving in that direction, and maybe that's all he wanted. I don't know. I think I'd be shocked if a talented team builder like Jeff Luhnow, who is smarter than a lot of people, if he may not get his chance this year, but in a couple years, I could see it happening if he wanted to do that. What I found interesting, AJ, is he mentioned a ton of other sports that he could have an interest in. I mean, he mentioned just about every sport imaginable, and I thought that was kind of intriguing that he mentioned so many different sports outside of baseball where he might have an interest, and the interest might be mutual.
I thought he didn't come across as a snitch. Certainly, he could have thrown a bunch of people under the bus. He could have named a bunch of names, and instead he worked around it. Would say, well, this person. He had a chance to really burn some people. If you're one of these guys on a team that didn't, get burned in this thing, do you maybe look at Jeff and say, this is the kind of guy that we should be working with? He's not going to rat us out, and he seems like a smart guy, as you've said. If Jeff's got some dirt on me, I might be even more motivated to hire him.
Well, so here's the thing. I think Jeff, one area where he did snitch is that he made sure that everybody knew the response to the SI article that was put out by the Astros was not his. And he said exactly who it was, which positions inside the Astros wrote that. So in a way, he did snitch there. And that was his way of saying, look, I was not culpable. However, he said it was given to him. He probably should have read it. Yeah, you should have read it. You're the head of the Astros. Anything that gets out officially from the Astros for a situation that is deemed serious, you got to read it And if you don't like the wording and it's too terse, which it clearly was, you got to go back and say, this ain't going to do it. Because I'm the face of the Astros and represent the Astros, and this is my situation. I hired this guy, so I need to make sure those words are right. So I thought Jeff throwing those people under the bus. Granted, those aren't other major league players. It's not his players. It's not his team, and it's not other teams. But it was somebody inside the organization. So I don't know how that will be looked at, because he definitely wanted to distance himself, and he took every opportunity he could and named positions on the team that were responsible for it.
It's funny that he did that, because it seems like in most people's eyes, and I would assume in the national media's eyes and in the eyes of any future employer, the Brendan Taubman thing is way down the list of things that you would worry about with Jeff, and things that if I were interviewing him, it'd be maybe the last thing I'd ask instead of a major talking point. Were you surprised that that's where he decided to roll over on some people, but with the code breaker, which by the way isn't illegal,
not illegal.
And the trash can thing, he was very particularly quiet about naming names.
Yeah, there's two things, right? There's building a team, but then there's also running a building and running an office and creating that culture inside the building. And one thing I've learned from team builders over the year and GM types and front office people is that obviously building a team comes first and foremost, but having a building that's all pulled in the same direction, ask the Texans here, it's important. And the way that you treat people inside of a building matters, because you want good people to stay around unless they get elevated with other major league teams. You don't want them to just leave you, because then you're in a constant state of having to replace, kind of like Nick Saban at Alabama. He's always having to rehire coaches, hire coaches, because guys don't like staying there, and he's got a reputation. So I think how you handle people in the building matters too. Will it matter as much? No, it doesn't matter as much as building a successful baseball team. But I do think it has value for sure.
This thing at the end of the day, it felt a little bit like, at the end where he's saying, I'm still an Astros fan. It felt like sort of a fluff up to Houston fans, but I don't think any fans of the other teams are going to be looking at Jeff Luhnow in any different light. That's my final takeaway from it.